Hello, welcome to my video. Today I'm going to show you how to solve a problem I get asked quite a lot, and that is when you have a Dynamo wheel set and a Dynamo Light or charging system, how do you shorten the cable that goes from the hub to the bars and the lights? In this instance, I don't need to shorten it. However, I've got an internal routed Dynamo routing down through the fork, and obviously I can't fit it through the hole with that, so I need to cut the end off, resolder, and then fit it so it's all nice and neat. So hopefully this video will answer the question. So there's a few tools you need to do this. Obviously you should have your Dynamo system. In this instance I'm using the K-Light system. But basically you need to cut the cable and resolder the connectors on the end once it's in position on the bike. So you need a few tools. You need your side cutters for cutting the cable. You need some wire strippers. It's useful to have a normal set of pliers just for crimping the terminals. You'll need a soldering iron and some solder. And it's also very useful to have a hot air gun just to shrink the heat wrap over the top. And then of course you need the fresh terminals. Quite often they come supplied with light systems and you get a few spares, but if not you can just get these uninsulated terminals, and these are 4.8mm push-on terminals, so 50 there, probably what, a tenner if that. It's useful to have in your garage just in case. And then I've got a roll of heat wrap. Again, it's worth just buying a big roll, and then when you need to change the system, if you've got a few bikes, it's nice and easy to do. So as I've already mentioned, today I need to fit my K-Light system onto the fork of my Mason ISO bike. It's been fitted to another bike with a suspension fork where it was just zip tied on the outside, but now I want to run the internal routing, so I've got to cut the ends off and feed it through. So that is the first step. It's cutting the ends off the existing cable, either to thread it through or cut it to the length. If you're going from like a mountain bike to a gravel bike, you might find you have a lot of excess cable, so it just keeps it nice and neat. So first stage, side cutters, chop the end off. So now you've cut your cable to length, or just trim the ends off if you're threading it through a fork. So the next thing to do, as you can see here, you need to be able to crimp or solder the two different wires. There's a positive and a negative. To be honest, on a Dynamo it doesn't really matter because it's you know, the current doesn't really matter which way around you have it. But you need to expose the wires and then strip them so that the copper is showing, and then you can fix that to the terminals. So next stage, stripping the wires. So there we have it. The two wires are stripped. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's the black outer insulation, and then there's a red and a white inner insulation. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a Stanley knife and I'm just going to cut back the outer insulation so that there's a bit more flexibility on the wires. You don't want it too tight because then it's hard to kind of maneuver the connectors into place. So I'm just going to trim that, and that'll make life a bit easier. So now I have the two strands of wire. It doesn't matter if you do it a little bit more than that, because you're going to use some shrink wrap to insulate it later anyway, and that will hold it back together. It is easier with a bit more, so yeah, you just have to sort of go by feel here. So basically now we're at the stage where we want to put the connectors back on, but before we do that, don't make the schoolboy error, which I've made before, of soldering the ends back on and forgetting to thread it through the hole in your fork, because then you've got to do the whole thing again and you look like a bit of an idiot. So next stage, thread it through the fork. So now you can see I've got the wire going through the fork. It's at the correct length. If you are putting it through a fork, then I'd suggest pushing as much through as you can. And you may notice I've got my bike on my workbench. If you can do this, it's much easier just to be able to sort of work at the right height. You really want the front wheel out because then it brings it closer to the table, and when you come to soldering, it'd be a bit easier and a bit easier to work from. So you can see here, this is the power in cable. The K-Light system has a switch here, so the power goes in there and then it splits to the USB charger, which is in my hand here, and then there's the connector, which then goes into the light. So yeah, so that's in there. Next stage, we need to put the terminals on so we can fix it to the fix the cable to the hub to generate some power. So at this point, you want to be warming up your soldering iron, because the next stage is to be crimping and soldering the terminals on the end. However, you will need to cut some little lengths of insulation, and don't forget, put the one you want to, you basically need 3 bits of insulation, 1 for each terminal and 1 for the join. So make sure you thread this on before you solder the terminals, otherwise it won't fit through the hole. The next stage is just to prepare the ends of the cables, or the wires, sorry, ready to be soldered into the connecting. These are just spade connectors. So what I like to do is I just twist up the ends of the cables so they're nice and tight, and then I like to solder and crimp with these just to make it extra secure, because the last thing you want when you're in the middle of the wilderness is for a cable to come undone and then you have to try and figure out how the hell to get it working again. So what I'm about to do now is twist the ends up and then just drop some solder into the sort of the crimp here to make it easier to solder up the wire in a few minutes time. So now I've got the ends of the cables prepared. I've got the spade connectors prepared with a line of solder in there. Essentially the reason I did that was now it's a bit awkward, especially if you've got an integrated fork here, because you've got the whole bike involved. Obviously if you're just shortening the cable and it's like an external routed cable, then it makes life a lot easier, but when the bike's involved you just want to get it as prepared as possible. So I'm going to line them out now, and then I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm just going to heat the solder that's already in the connectors and then just lay the cable in there so it solders itself in, and then I'll just top it up and crimp it. So as you can see, one of the terminals is now soldered into position, so I'm just going to do the other one, and then I'm just going to add some more solder on the top just to neaten it up, and then I'm going to crimp the rest of the terminal on there, so it should be doubly secure. At least that's the plan anyway. So there we go, got the terminal soldered and crimped onto the end there. So we're pretty much done. It's not the neatest job I've ever done, but it should be secure enough. So all we need to do now is finish it off with the insulation. So I'm just going to add the insulation over the terminals and then slide this down just to make it nice and neat, and cover my bad soldering. So once you've slotted the insulation over the connectors, all you need to do then is use your heat gun just to shrink it so it's nice and neat and tight. I tend to leave a couple of mil just showing at the end of the connector, just makes it a little bit easier to get it on. If the insulation is over the end of it, it can make life difficult, so give yourself a little bit of leeway and it will make life a bit easier. That is the Dynamo wire shortens, fitted internally, got new terminals on there, nice and insulated, so hopefully that'll be nice and reliable and give me power and lighting in the upcoming races. All I need to do now is just put the rest of the system on the bike, which is nice and simple, fit the front wheel and then plug in the terminals to the hub, and I'll be away. Hope you liked the video. I might make some more things like this, so let us know if that's the kind of thing you're into. And yeah, give us a like and a subscribe and all that, and speak to you soon.